Well, Monja, thank you so much for joining me here on the Entrepreneurial Success Podcast. I'm thrilled to have you here. We got some great stuff that we're going to talk about today. But before we get started with that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Hi, so thank you so much first to have me on the podcast. I'm super excited. So yeah, my name is Monja and I help aspiring online entrepreneurs, coaches, bloggers, content creators to use social media and content marketing effectively to grow the business, grow the audience, get clients consistently. So yeah, that's what I'm doing.
That's amazing. And I know one of the things we're going to talk about today in order to get clients is how to use Instagram stories in particular. And we got a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about. So for those of you listening, stay tuned. We're going to dive into some great strategies that you can use yourself in order to get clients. Whether you're a coach or you're a blogger, it's going to go both ways. But Monja, what I would like to know is, obviously, I'm saying this with a huge compliment, but you're so young. Oh my goodness. And you've been doing this for some time, but what got you started in order to, become a coach and do all of these amazing things and working with so many other people? What was that push or that motivation to get you to where you are now?
Yeah, so great question. Thank you. So basically, I started off as I studied media and I studied journalism. So I was always quite into writing, video stuff. But I didn't, and I worked in television in Germany. So I'm actually from Germany. So some people might hear a little accent, but I'm from Germany. So I worked in television as a producer. And then I moved to Scotland and I just couldn't find a job in my area, in my field of interest. So I started a corporate job and I've been doing this for 4 years, and then it just got to the point where I was like, I need to do something with my life. It came to the point where I was so unfulfilled in my job. I really missed creativity. I got really into personal development with a lot of people, can relate to that. They're looking for answers, and then they dive into the beautiful world of personal development. And that actually inspired me to start a blog. So I was like, you know what, I just need a creative outlet. And I knew that blogging would be maybe a way for me to get substitute my income in order to then leave my job. So that was actually my plan in the beginning. So I started a blog about my life in Glasgow, because I live in Glasgow, and I wanted to talk about personal development. And from that, I kind of fell into the coaching world, and I was like, whoa, what is that? It's such a literally a new universe that opened up to me, and I have never heard of coaching except fitness coaching. And then I was like, this sounds so interesting. And how this all really happened is I got really inspired by life coaching because I was really into personal development. So that's really how I started. And I specialized on perfectionism. So I helped early stage entrepreneurs with their perfectionism and their perfectionist mindset to work through that. And for that, I just, because I worked with a lot of early stage coaches and bloggers, I really felt like I can provide so much more in-depth support when it comes to their business and their social media, but it wasn't really my place as their mindset coach to do that. So I decided recently to pivot a little bit and really dive into, my zone of genius, which is social media and content marketing. So
oh my gosh, no, that's great. I love that you're telling that story, because so many people can relate to you, being in a situation where they just didn't feel fulfilled with what they were doing and how they transitioned into just starting something else and that just moving or building up onto where they are now, exactly like you did, going from blog, coaching, and now you just, using social media as well. And I think this kind of segues into what we're going to talk about. And I really want to go into this because you've got some great stuff that you're going to share with us today. We're going to talk about Instagram stories and how to use it strategically, really, to get more clients. So in particular, if you are in the service-based industry, for those of you listening, and you are thinking about what you can do in addition to what you're doing in order to get more clients, then maybe Instagram stories is something that you can try out. And the best thing is just to give it a go. or talking about perfectionism. Obviously, it doesn't have to be perfect when you try a new strategy, but just to go and, see what it's like, if it is something that you can connect to and relate to. So Monja, talk to us a little bit, because I think one of the first things when we talk about Instagram or any other social media platform, I think the one thing that is quite crucial, which you mentioned yourself, is engagement. Talk to us a little bit about engagement, and we know it is important, but the benefits of engaging and what you see from it.
Yeah, so engagement is extremely important when it comes to, the algorithm. The algorithm on Instagram really loves an engaging profile, because the more engagement it sees on the profile, the more it will push out your post to other profiles that, are connected to the followers that you already have. So it's really important to have an engaged audience, especially when you use Instagram for business. It's really important because you don't want to talk about your offer or, your freebie or whatever you have to offer, if it's a program or if it's just a free resource, or if you are a blogger and you want to promote, I don't know, a discount code or whatever. It's really important that you actually have an audience that is reacting to what you do, and not just, you have 10,000 followers and then you launch something and literally no one buys from you. So you really want to avoid that. And that's why it's so important to really think about, a lot of times people are like, I need more followers, and it's all like vanity metrics. It's all like, oh, I need a lot of followers, but then there are people who have like 10k plus followers, and then, as I said, they launch something and no one buys from that. So it's not about the followers, it's really about the quality of the followers. And I think especially when you start with Instagram, a lot of people get caught up in like, oh, I need to look legit, and that's why I need like a lot of followers, but that's not actually necessary in order to have a successful business. So it's much more important that you have, even if you have a small following, even if it's just 1,000 people, like you have 1k followers, but you have a really high engagement rate. So for example, my audience is like that. I just have over 1,000 followers, but I have a really, really high engagement rate. So and that comes from, because I don't really necessarily focus on growth, I really focus on engagement. So you really have to shift your focus from I need to grow, and then instead of thinking, okay, who are these people in my audience? Like, who is actually following me, right? So one of the things I like to do, for example, is when another person follows me, I go to their profile, I like a few of their posts, I look if they have a story ring, which if you have a business, you should always have a story ring up. You should always have a fresh story for people to see. So I check out if they have a story ring. If they do, I watch their story, and then I comment on their story, and just like, if I don't want to follow them because they're not of interest to me, I don't follow them. But I do acknowledge them. Hey, thank you, for following me. Sometimes I leave them a message. I just acknowledge that I actually recognize that this person went to my profile and it was important enough for that person to hit follow, right? So we really have to acknowledge that those people, it's not like everyone is like, pressing follow. Like, it's a selective process. So I really have to acknowledge that and actually build connections with my new followers. That's really important.
I think what you're saying is so valuable, because I've seen it, and hands up, personally, this is me myself. When I get a follower, I'm like, yay, I got a follower, but then I leave it at that. But what you're saying is you need to go that extra step and build that engagement with your followers. Instead of just going, yay, I've got a follower, you actually got to go back and just send them a message, send them a DM or whatever, and just say, thank you so much for following me, or thank you, whatever, for, being in contact. And that's something that I haven't been doing. So that is a great tip you're just giving me now as well. So for the audience listening now, I think that is one of the most important things. What Monja is saying is, it is not just about building a following, it is about the engagement. That is where the golden nuggets are going to lie for you if you use Instagram. Now, I just want to talk to you about the engagement, obviously, on the stories, because when you put out posts and things, you always have it available. There can be engagement on that. But from your experience, do you have an example of something where you put out stories and you get engagement? Or, looking at it from another aspect, do you go and look at people's stories and then engage with them? And do you do that often, or only with people that you really tend to like?
Yes. So I do that. Like so here's the thing with stories. Like it's really trendy. Like people love watching stories. Like it's just like some people are just obsessed with it. And I love stories because what it does is like the feed is like it's almost like your business profile. It's like it's curated. You give tips or advice, or I hope you do if you have a business and you're not just posting a photo and an emoji. Please have some valuable caption. But if so this is like your sort of your business profile, but the story is like where people get to know you as a person, as a business owner. It's where you build those personal connections, where you break down boundaries. And I love to see that because it's like behind the scenes, you might show your pet, or I don't know, like your office or what you eat, I don't know. And then you get like a connection with that person. So for example, like you post something, I don't know, you went to a concert, and then people are like, oh, I like that band, or like you really like build that connection that is deeper than just like liking a photo and writing a nice comment on a caption. So it's really leveraging these connections that you have. And a lot of people don't really do that, so they don't really understand how stories work. They're like, I'm just gonna like show what I eat for dinner, and then that's it. Or they put one story up, like one random story, and that's it. And there's no context to it. So this is one of the things that I want to talk about is like when you start with stories, really see it as what it is. It is a story, right? So you really want to create some context around it. So for example, what I find really so there are two things I find really frustrating, and I'm going to give your listeners that, so in order for them to like avoid making those mistakes. So one thing is that people post a picture of, I don't know, some like landscape or some random picture, and it has maybe a location tag so people know where it is, but there's no context to it. So there's no context like, why is this person there? What is she doing there? And it's so frustrating because I'm like, I don't know anything about this in like the context of it. And then there's another thing that I see a lot of people do. It's getting better now, but it's been something that is really frustrating, is when there are no subtitles or captions when they do video content on stories. Guys, you cannot. Honestly, you cannot. Like, this is literally one of the worst things I see. No one watches that. No one watches their stories with sound on. Like, people watch it like when they're like in the subway or when they're at work. And like, you have to have captions. You have to have a little summary of what you're talking about. People will just pass by and they will not, take care of like what you're actually talking about.
Oh my gosh, that is so, so true. And I'm glad you brought that up. So like Monja said, the two things to remember is when you do your stories. Number one is when you have a story going out, do something a little bit personal where people can get to know you. It's not just about promoting your business all the time, but also make sure that it has some context to it. So write something on top of the image, make sure people know what it is about. And then the second thing is obviously is when you do videos on your stories, on your Instagram stories, make sure that there are captions so people can obviously read along. Because yeah, let's face it, most people, I do it too. I look at videos, but I don't put the sound on. So it is so true. People don't do that. So in order to make sure that you capture that engagement, have captions on your videos, but also have some context on your images. Talk to us a little bit about once you get that engagement and once you start having conversations with people, what is the next step then, or how would you convert those people to clients? And yeah, I think it's an important question because obviously that's what we aim for at the end of the day. You want to make sure that you can get some clients from those kind of engagements.
Yes. So there's a thing that I would recommend is not going into this thinking I need to get clients, because then you will not be genuine. So how I always approach this is I just want to get in touch with people. Like, I just want to make as many connections as possible, because even if they're not clients, you might have collaborations. It might give you inspiration for content. Like, you never know what you can get out of it. So I always approach it as like, I will just want to get something positive out of this, right? So when it comes to converting people from stories, it's really important that it's a long game. Like, it really can take some time, right? So, for example, one of my recent clients, she's been following me for 2 months before, she became my client, but she's commenting on my stories. We were chatting in DMs, but she wasn't really ready to, whatever held her back. But then, this is why a lot of people need a lot of time. And through those stories, people connect with you and get to know you, right? Yes. So one thing that I really like to say is you have to have a call to action in your stories. So I always like to have some sort of call to action, whether it's like really use the features available to you in your story. So you can do polls, you can do quizzes, you can do market research in there. I do all my market research in there. And I explain you how I do that and how that works. You can do questions. So there are different things you can do. And the way you do market research is you want to identify your ideal client, right? So you want to make sure you ask the right questions in there. So what I like to do, you can use the quiz options, for example, not as a quiz, but as a market research. So you could say, what are your current biggest struggle in business? And then you have, like, instead of quiz answers, you just have different answers that they can then take. So it could be content creation, it could be getting clients, I don't know, whatever, like come up with something. And then you can do the poll thing. I love to do the poll thing where you do yes or no. So you can talk about pain points that your ideal client has, or your own story that is connecting. Always connect back in your content to the pain points of your ideal client. So you can talk about something, like a client of mine had this issue and blah, blah, blah. You talk about this in your story. And then you say, can you relate to that? Yes or no? It's easier if you start with polling, for example, to have easy answers like yes or no. Like, you need to almost train your audience to get used to, if you're not using those features yet, you need to train them. So maybe even start with questions that are not really relating to your business. Start about something, hey, I'm drinking coffee today, or whatever. Do you like coffee or tea? Like, really easy questions so people get used to, oh, she's doing polls now, okay. Because a lot of people get really frustrated in the beginning when they do polls and no one replies. And it's really just training your audience. The more you do it, the more consistent you are, the more people will engage with it. Believe me, it was the same for me, it's the same for my clients. And what you then do is you filter out with the questions you then propose, you filter out your ideal audience, and then you kind of target those people in DMs. So the goal of stories, the goal of business on Instagram is you want people to get into your DMs, right? You want to have personal one-to-one conversations with them. And some coaches do this in really sneaky ways and sleazy ways. Like, I don't really do that. Like, I really want to make sure I find aligned clients. So I really want to make sure I want to find people that are right for my program, that are right for me, because I don't want to waste my time with anyone. So really come from like an aligned place and not like a needy, like, sleazy place. And then just like have conversations with those people, like ask them, hey, thank you so much for answering my poll. If you were asking, for example, if you were asking about problems or struggles, like, hey, I would love to like help you with this, like, can you just tell me a little bit more about what you're struggling with? You just want to make sure you identify who might be your ideal client, and then like sort of start a connection with them in the Instagram DMs.
Oh my gosh, that is absolutely amazing. I'm so glad you brought that up as well. Basically, it is a long game, like you said. It is not something where it's instant, you're going to get clients instantly, but it's all about you being consistent. And like you say, starting off with the polls as an example, using one of those features and just putting it out there and just being consistent with it. And people will start taking on those micro conversions where they start engaging back with you, which is what you want. And then from there, you take it one step further and go into the DMs where you start connecting with them on a one-on-one basis. So I'm so glad you brought that up as well. And I think that segues a little bit into what we also wanted to talk about, the features. So there are so many features available on Instagram and on Instagram stories in particular. what would you say, apart from the poll that you've just mentioned, what do you say, is there a top 3, a top 2 that you use? What is there that you use in order to make sure that you can kind of have that engagement with the audience?
Yeah, so I love the polls, I love the quiz, I love the question tag. So you can ask a question like, you can also use this as another idea. So if you have a free resource or something, you can promote that. But always promote it with like, I have, are you struggling with this? Like, I have this solution, right? So you always want to start off with like a pain point and you have the solution for it, not just say, hey, I've got this freebie. Like, really make sure you like, I also like to, with stories, just quickly, when you want to promote something like a free resource or a podcast episode or something, always build some sort of anticipation. So what I like to do is just to, in order just to say, hey, this is my podcast, I'm like, something really exciting is happening today. And then on the next slide, you could just have like just a blank, like a colorful page on the story. And then you just write something really exciting is happening today, ... And then you can open up with, my podcast, it's like out or something. It's like people want to know like, oh, what is it? I want to know what this is. Like, it's like really use it as a storytelling way, basically, how you like engage with your audience. And then you could use that question tag for, so I have this free resource, like, will you be interested? If yes, drop an emoji or something. And people just drop an emoji in the question bit, and you already know as well, okay, these are ideal clients because they want my resource, right? So there are so many different ways to engage, but equally filter out your ideal client as well. So these are like my favorite tools that I use for that sort of research bit. But then just for like fun things, like the GIFs are great. Like it really gives a little bit of personality, like when you add a little GIF to something that you talk about. I love doing a bit more of like making sure that my brand is consistent in the stories. So some people are really good with that. So they always use the same fonts, they always use the same color palettes, they always use the same structures. So people, because often they just watch story after story and then they come to your story and they immediately identify, oh, it's Monja's story, or Henrik's story, and then it's like, so it's like this like sort of recognizable feature that you're using in your story. So you want to make sure you have a consistent brand profile on all of your platforms, basically.
Oh my gosh, that is fantastic. And I think for me, how can I say, I'm only just starting now to really get in touch with Instagram. I mean, before it was Facebook for me, but I wanted to pivot a little bit and use Instagram because I find some of the features a lot easier for me personally for what I'm doing in my business. And I'm learning so much from you. I mean, gosh, I'm making notes like crazy here, and I hope you guys can't hear my pen scribbling away the whole time. But I think the one thing that you're saying, which is something I've never thought about, it's when people sit and watch the stories, they literally start with the first story and they just watch it through all the way. And the fact is that if you have your brand consistent with who you are and what you do, then people will automatically start recognizing that the more they see your brand. And the more they see you, the more they're going to go and, like you said, you had a client who spent time with you for 2 months before she started reaching out to you. But it's all about being consistent and putting yourself out there. But also a way to do that for you to be seen is to be consistent with your brand. So I'm really glad you brought that up as well. I think it is so, so important. So for anybody listening, that is definitely something that you need to think about as well in order to make sure your brand is consistent. Another thing we kind of touched upon a little bit earlier on, but I think I wanted to bring this up again because you and I spoke about this before we started the recording, is the following. Now, the following is one of those big things. People want to hit their 1K, 10K, 50K amount of followers on there, but that is not really the case. You don't need to have a big following, but there's a caveat to that, depending on what kind of business you have. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about that and explain that in a bit more detail?
Yes, so generally the following is still what people think is important. It's really not. I like that in different countries already, the likes are not visible anymore. All these vanity metrics are gonna be eradicated eventually, I think. but the following is still in the heads of people, like, oh my God, yeah, big following. So when you have an online service-based business, you don't need a big following. Like I said, the engagement is really what you should focus on, because it's the personal connections. If you are a blogger and you want to have brand deals and, do like your, brand collaborations, unfortunately, it's still the case that a lot of brands will only work with bloggers who have a certain amount of followers. So, for example, I'm over 1,000 followers, so I'm been taking a bit more seriously now. But a lot of brands reach out, and when I reach out to brands or to influencer marketing, like platforms that you can sign up with, for example, they are like, no, you need at least 5,000 followers. So I think it will change in the maybe next couple of years, because people will be aware that it's a lot more engagement. Because when I tell people my engagement rate, they're like, yeah, but you don't have enough followers. So people don't really care about that yet in the industries, but I think it will change. But for now, unfortunately, it's still the reality that if you want to be a blogger, a bigger following is helpful, because even if your engagement is shit, even if your engagement is not great, the brands will be like, oh yeah, but you have like 5K followers. Yeah. So unfortunately, that is the reality just now, but I think it will change.
Yeah. Now, I think it's really important what you're saying, and it brings back to what we spoke about earlier on about your engagement being the kind of like number one focus rather than the focus of building a following. But then obviously for a blogger, that's a little bit on the opposite side. So just to be clear on that, because the more views you have and the more people you have, obviously as a blogger, the better for your industry. Things change, technology changes, things will evolve. For all we know, Instagram will bring out new features. They will take away some features like the likes. So there's so many things that could constantly happen. But I think once you have that engagement going, that is something that can't be taken away, because an engagement is a trust factor. It's a nurturing factor that you're bringing in. And once you start engaging and you're building on that nurturing and that trust with that individual, you might have a long-term client, and that's something that no algorithm can take away from you.
Exactly. And even if they don't convert into clients, like that's the most important bit. Like they can still be your fans, like they can still like you. For example, I have a lot of people in my audience that would never be my clients, but they love what I do and they share my podcast on their platform, like so more people can see it, right? So they don't have to be your ideal client, but they can still be your fans and love what you do, and then promote you, so they can be still like super like helpful, beneficial to your business.
Oh my goodness, Monja, I can just see the audience now, everybody making as crazy notes as I have just through this podcast episode. Is there anything from your point of view as a last minute that you want to throw in there? Any last tips that you want to give everybody?
I think I just want you to be really intentional with it. So yes, of course you can. I also do sometimes stories where I just don't really think about it. I'm just like, oh, I'm just sharing this. But in overall, you should have, okay, so here's the thing. You should always have at least one story up. So at least one. So a story is valid for 24 hours. So at least have one up. It would be best to have at least 5 up, so people can actually, when they come to your profile, people go to the story. So if you don't have anything up, really make sure you have something up. And I know in the beginning it takes some time to get used to it, but you will get used to it the more you do it. It's really, you need to be consistent with it, and then it becomes literally second nature. Another thing is that you have to really think about your intentions with it. So like, what is it you want to do today? Like, what is the sort of content you want to provide? Like, I like to do mini trainings on it. So I have a thing on my story. And the thing is, the more you do it, the more your audience will get used to it. So I have a thing that is called bathroom coaching. So I go into the bathroom and I just like have a little mini training and I talk about something, and people are like, I love your bathroom coaching. So it's, it becomes a thing for people and they want to see it. So it's really about, being intentional with it, building context around with it, using all the features that are available, and being consistent with it.
Oh my gosh, I love that you said it. I'm bathroom coaching. Who would have thought? That is fantastic. Oh my gosh, Monja, no, this has absolutely been fantastic. I loved having this conversation with you, and thank you so much for sharing an abundance of tips. This has been, my mind is racing at the moment. I'm going to have to think a little bit about it. I know, that's great. Honestly, I love it. I love it. I love it. But before we conclude with everything, you obviously have a fantastic podcast going, and I've listened to your podcast as well. I love what you do. Tell us a little bit about the podcast and where people can go and listen to you.
Yes, so thank you. So my podcast is called Imperfect Entrepreneurs, and it's all about building an online business or building a business, starting a business. It's about tips and tricks of doing that, but it's from more of like a mindset point of view. So it's about talking about perfectionism and how you don't have to be a perfect entrepreneur. You don't have to do everything perfectly in order to start. We're talking a lot about that. We're talking also about overcoming limiting beliefs that a lot of entrepreneurs have, fears, doubts, self-sabotage. So it's a bit of a different take on a business podcast. I have guests on as well. So it's a mix of solo episode and guest hosts that I have. So yeah, I love it. And you can listen to it on Apple, you can listen to it on Spotify, Stitcher, or the common podcast platforms.
Perfect. And what we're going to do is the podcast link will be below in my show notes, including Monja's website. She's got a very cool website. I have to say that. Hats off to you. It's really, really cool. Very, very chic. So go and have a look at Monja's website as well. Monja, I can only, thank you for your time being here with us on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And I'd love to keep in touch with you. Let's chat a bit more, bring you on for another episode. And maybe at that point, we can talk a little bit about overcoming perfectionism. So for the audience listening, I think we should definitely do another episode where we talk about overcoming perfectionism, because that is also a big, big topic. And everybody would get some great tips from Monja on that as well. Monja, thank you again. I wish you all of the best. And let's stay in touch, okay?
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much, Henry. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.